Welcome to a journey into one of the most chilling and fascinating corners of the human mind. A place where reality and illusion collide, and where the people you love most suddenly seem like strangers. Imagine waking up one day convinced that your spouse, your parent, or your closest friend has been replaced by an impostor, a perfect copy, but not them. This is not a nightmare from a horror film. This is a real psychological phenomenon known as Capgras Delusion. It's a rare but powerful disorder that shakes the very foundation of human connection, the trust we place in others. The mind, our greatest tool for survival and success, sometimes turns against us, twisting perception and distorting reality. This dark deception isn't just a curiosity for psychologists or neurologists. It's a profound lesson for all of us about the fragility of trust, the resilience required to face internal chaos, and the power we hold to reclaim control over our minds. Why does this happen? How does a healthy mind convince itself that someone close has been replaced? And perhaps most importantly, what can this teach us about success and personal growth? In this video, we will unravel the mystery of Capgras Delusion. We'll dive deep into its neurological roots, explore chilling real-life cases, and uncover the dark psychological forces at play. But more than that, we'll discover how understanding this disorder can unlock powerful strategies to safeguard our minds, build resilience, and thrive in the face of uncertainty. Because at the edge of madness lies a profound truth: our minds are not just vulnerable, they are also infinitely adaptable. The same brain that deceives us can also be trained to overcome, to heal, and to grow stronger than ever. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will change how you see your mind, your relationships, and your path to true success. Capgras Delusion, sometimes called imposter syndrome of the mind, not to be confused with the everyday feeling of self-doubt, is a rare and deeply unsettling psychiatric condition, named after the French psychiatrist Joseph Capgras, who first described it in 1923. This disorder causes a person to believe that someone close to them, often a spouse, family member, or dear friend, has been replaced by an identical impostor. Imagine looking at your partner's face, hearing their voice, yet feeling utterly convinced that they are not who they appear to be. The emotional connection that normally confirms familiarity is broken, and instead, a profound sense of alienation and suspicion takes hold. Capgras delusion is not simply a matter of forgetfulness or confusion. It is a specific kind of misrecognition, a disconnect between visual recognition and emotional familiarity. The brain sees a familiar face but fails to trigger the usual emotional response. Instead, it signals, "This person is not the one you know." It's as if the brain's alarm system is hijacked by a phantom warning. This disorder usually occurs in the context of neurological diseases like dementia, brain injury, or schizophrenia, but it can sometimes appear without an obvious cause. Its rarity and bizarre symptoms make it a fascinating case study in how deeply our brains depend on emotional memory to navigate social realities. But beyond the clinical symptoms, Capgras delusion challenges some of the core assumptions we hold about identity, trust, and reality itself. How much of what we know about others depends on unseen emotional wiring? What happens when that wiring breaks? In today's fast-paced world, where trust is often fragile and uncertainty abundant, Capgras offers a dark mirror reflecting the psychological vulnerabilities all humans share. It reminds us that perception is not just about sight or sound, but deeply rooted feelings, and when those feelings fracture, reality itself becomes unstable. Understanding Capgras is not just about diagnosing a rare condition. It's about grasping how the mind constructs trust, how easily that trust can shatter, and how important it is to cultivate mental resilience in our own lives. Because even if you never suffer from such a delusion, the principles behind it apply to everyone who wants to navigate life's uncertainties with strength and clarity. Now, let's delve into the brain, the mysterious organ behind this curious delusion, and see why the mind sometimes betrays us in this way. To understand Capgras delusion, we must first explore the intricate dance between different parts of the brain. the very machinery that creates our sense of reality, identity, and trust. Our brains are incredible prediction engines. Every time you see a familiar face, two powerful processes happen almost simultaneously. One is the recognition of the face itself by the visual cortex, and the other is an emotional response triggered by the limbic system, the part of the brain that deals with emotions and memory. In a typical mind, these two systems work in harmony. The visual cortex identifies a loved one's face, and the limbic system floods your mind with feelings of familiarity, warmth, and trust. This emotional confirmation solidifies the recognition and reassures Yug. This is someone I know and love. But in Capgras Delusion, this connection is severed. The face is recognized visually, but the emotional response is missing or distorted. The brain perceives the person as a stranger, even though they look identical to the loved one. Researchers believe this disruption is caused by damage or dysfunction in the pathway between the temporal lobe, where facial recognition occurs, and the amygdala, the emotional processing center. Without the emotional stamp of recognition, the mind tries to make sense of this mismatch and concludes that the familiar person must be an impostor. This is the brain's way of rationalizing what it cannot emotionally accept. It creates an alternative reality, however bizarre, to explain the unsettling feeling. From a dark psychology perspective, this disconnect reveals how deeply emotions govern our perception of reality. Our beliefs, memories, and decisions are rarely based on cold facts alone. They are fueled by feelings. This neural betrayal teaches us a vital lesson: our mind's interpretation of the world is always filtered through emotional lenses, which can be distorted or manipulated. It also highlights a paradox of success and personal growth. Logic and reason are necessary but not sufficient. Emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and regulate our feelings and those of others, is the foundation upon which trust, relationships, and resilience are built. When the emotional wiring fails, the consequences are catastrophic, but when nurtured and strengthened, it becomes our greatest asset. Capgras Delusion is a vivid example of what happens when that wiring breaks down. But it also challenges us to ask, how can we protect our minds from similar betrayals? Even when the stakes are not clinical but personal or professional. The mind's creation of impostors, those shadowy duplicates of the people we trust most, is not merely a neurological glitch. It is also a manifestation of deep psychological defenses and distortions. This is where dark psychology enters the picture, offering profound insights into how and why our brains sometimes betray us by constructing frightening illusions. At its core, Capgras Delusion reveals a fundamental tension within the psyche, the conflict between what we consciously perceive and what our unconscious fears or doubts demand. In everyday life, dark psychology studies how our hidden motives, defense mechanisms, and cognitive biases shape our thoughts and behaviors, often in ways that sabotage our happiness, relationships, and success. When the mind encounters overwhelming stress, trauma, or unresolved conflict, it can protect itself by erecting psychological barriers, sometimes by distorting reality itself. Creating an impostor in place of a loved one can be seen as a drastic psychological defense, a way to externalize fear or betrayal that the person cannot consciously face. Imagine the mind as a fortress, trying to defend itself against an invisible attack. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether the threat is real or imagined. The emotional alarm triggers the defense system into overdrive. In Capgras, this defense distorts perception to the point that the victim convinces themselves their closest relationships are fake, because the truth, a feeling of loss, betrayal, or abandonment, is too painful to accept directly. From the perspective of success strategies, understanding this dark side of the mind teaches us a vital lesson. Unchecked fears and unresolved emotional wounds can distort our perception of reality and sabotage our progress. Personal growth requires shining a light into these dark corners. It demands courage to face uncomfortable truths, and the willingness to challenge our assumptions. Even when impostors are not literal, the mind's tendency to create impostors, can appear in everyday life as self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or toxic suspicion in relationships. By learning from Capgras Delusion, we can become more aware of how our fears might trick us into mistrusting those we love, or worse, mistrusting ourselves. To truly succeed, whether in business, relationships, or personal development, we must train our minds to discern truth from illusion, to cultivate emotional awareness, and to confront shadows rather than hide from them. In the next section, we'll explore real-life stories of Capgras Delusion, cases that shock but also inspire us to appreciate the power and complexity of the human mind. To truly grasp the impact of Capgras Delusion, it helps to step into the lives of those who have experienced it. Stories where reality twists, trust shatters, and the mind's betrayal becomes heartbreakingly real. One of the most famous cases involved a woman who, after a traumatic brain injury, became convinced that her husband was an impostor. Despite his familiar face and reassuring words, she saw him as a stranger who had replaced the man she loved. This belief wasn't fleeting, it persisted, creating a gulf between them that words alone could not bridge. For the husband, the experience was devastating, to be seen not as a partner, but as a stranger. For the woman, the fear and confusion were overwhelming, trapped in a reality where trust was impossible. In another case, a man with schizophrenia became convinced that his mother had been replaced by a double. This delusion led to intense fear and paranoia, isolating him from family and community. His mind constructed an alternate reality to protect itself from emotional pain, but in doing so, it caused profound suffering. These cases highlight the emotional and psychological pain behind the clinical diagnosis. They remind us that Capgras Delusion is not just a medical curiosity. It's a human tragedy that challenges our understanding of identity and connection. But there's also a deeper lesson here for all of us. These individuals, despite their struggles, teach us about resilience, the ability to endure internal chaos, to seek truth beyond illusion, and to reclaim agency over the mind. Their stories serve as powerful metaphors for anyone who has faced betrayal, doubt, or loss. Moments when the familiar feels foreign and trust is broken. We all encounter impostors in life, be they in relationships, self-perception, or external circumstances. What can we learn from these cases? First, that the mind is fragile but not helpless. With support, understanding, and courage, healing is possible. Second, that recognizing and naming our fears is the first step toward growth. When the mind's illusions threaten our well-being, confronting them head-on is the path to freedom. And third, that success, in any form, requires emotional honesty and the strength to face even the darkest parts of our psyche. As we move forward, let these real-life accounts ground us in empathy and motivate us to nurture mental strength. Because while Capgras Delusion shows what can go wrong inside the mind, it also illuminates the path to overcoming internal betrayal and rebuilding trust. Next, we'll discuss how to recognize the signs of this delusion, not just for clinicians, but for anyone who seeks to understand the complexities of trust and perception in human relationships. Understanding Capgras Delusion begins with recognizing its subtle but profound signs, the emotional and cognitive cracks that transform familiar faces into impostors. While this condition is rare, becoming aware of its symptoms can deepen our insight into how the mind handles trust, fear, and identity. One of the most striking signs is the persistent belief that a close family member or friend has been replaced by an identical but fake double. This belief goes beyond normal doubt or confusion. It is fixed and resistant to logical explanation or reassurance. No amount of proof or emotional connection seems to break through the delusion. Individuals with Capgras may show emotional detachment toward the person they believe is an impostor. They might avoid contact, express suspicion, or even hostility, driven by an intense fear of betrayal. This detachment isn't a conscious choice, but a symptom of the brain's disconnect between recognition and emotional response. You might notice signs of anxiety, paranoia, or confusion accompanying the delusion. The individual often struggles with the internal conflict between what their eyes see and what their emotions feel, or don't feel. In many cases, Capgras delusion appears alongside other neurological or psychiatric symptoms such as memory loss, hallucinations, or cognitive decline. But in some rare cases, it can emerge in isolation, making it even more perplexing for families and caregivers. For loved ones witnessing these signs, it can be heartbreaking and confusing. The person who once offered comfort now seems distant, mistrusting, and fearful. The key is to approach with patience, empathy, and support, recognizing that the delusion is a symptom of a deeper neurological or psychological issue, not a personal rejection. For anyone interested in personal growth and emotional intelligence, this awareness translates into a broader lesson: our perceptions and emotional connections shape our reality. When these bonds weaken, due to illness, trauma, or stress, the world can feel unfamiliar and threatening. This is not just a medical phenomenon. It's a human experience that echoes moments when we feel disconnected from ourselves or others. Recognizing these emotional disconnects early, whether in ourselves or others, empowers us to seek help, foster understanding, and build resilience. As we continue, we'll explore how Capgras delusion teaches us about trust and its fragility, and how we can apply those lessons to strengthen our own relationships and minds. Trust is the invisible thread weaving human relationships into the fabric of life. It is the foundation upon which families, friendships, and partnerships grow. But Capgras delusion exposes the fragility of this thread, showing us how quickly the mind can unravel it and how devastating that unraveling can feel. At its core, Capgras is a profound betrayal, not by another person, but by the mind itself. It teaches us that trust is not only a social contract, but a neurological miracle, a seamless integration of perception, emotion, and memory. When this integration breaks, even the most familiar faces become alien. The people we depend on, love, and cherish are suddenly strangers. This cognitive fracture plunges us into isolation, fear, and confusion, a darkness that can feel inescapable. Yet within this darkness lies a powerful lesson: trust is not a given. It must be nurtured, maintained, and repaired, both within ourselves and in our relationships. In personal growth and success, trust extends beyond others. It includes trusting ourselves. Just as the mind can deceive us with impostors, it can also betray us through doubt, fear, and insecurity. Recognizing this vulnerability is the first step towards strengthening our inner trust. Building resilience means cultivating emotional awareness, embracing uncertainty, and developing the courage to confront difficult truths. It means fostering authentic communication and compassion, not only for others but for our own inner struggles. Capgras delusion challenges us to examine the roots of mistrust. What fears or wounds cause us to see others as impostors? How can we heal these fractures to restore connection? In the journey of success, these questions are crucial. A leader who cannot trust their team, a partner who suspects betrayal, or an individual who doubts their own worth, all face internal impostors that hinder growth and fulfillment. By learning from the shadows cast by Capgras, we equip ourselves with strategies to guard against emotional fractures, rebuild broken bonds, and strengthen the foundation of trust upon which success stands. Next, we will explore practical strategies to build resilience against mental deception and nurture trust, helping you transform vulnerability into power. Building resilience against the mind's deceptive tendencies is a cornerstone of lasting success, personal growth, and emotional well-being. Capgras delusion may seem like an extreme case, a rare malfunction in the brain, but its underlying principles resonate in everyday challenges: self-doubt, fear of betrayal, and distorted perceptions that can derail our progress. So, how do we protect ourselves from falling victim to these mental impostors? How do we cultivate a mind strong enough to face uncertainty without losing grip on reality? First, cultivate emotional awareness. Understand your feelings deeply. Don't suppress or ignore discomfort. Emotional clarity is your mind's compass. It guides you toward truth, even when the path is unclear. Second, practice mindfulness and grounding techniques. These tools help you stay anchored in the present moment, preventing the mind from spiraling into fear-driven fantasies or irrational mistrust. Third, embrace uncertainty as part of growth. Life's unpredictability can trigger mental distortions when we resist it. Learning to accept what we cannot control builds mental flexibility and reduces the power of imposters born from fear. Fourth, build strong support networks. Connection is the antidote to isolation. Whether through friends, family, mentors, or professional help, sharing your fears and doubts can reveal perspectives you might miss alone. Fifth, engage in critical self-reflection. Challenge your beliefs regularly. Ask yourself, is this fear based on evidence or assumption? Am I seeing reality or a distorted version? This habit sharpens your mental filters. Sixth, develop a growth mindset. See setbacks, doubts, and even mental confusion as opportunities to learn and strengthen your resilience, not as signs of failure or weakness. Seventh, seek professional support when needed. Mental health professionals can offer tools and therapies that help repair and strengthen neural and emotional connections, especially when distortions become overwhelming. By applying these strategies, you create a mental fortress that guards against deception, internal or external. You become less susceptible to imposters, whether they lurk in your mind as anxiety and doubt or appear in relationships as mistrust and suspicion. Remember, resilience is not about never feeling fear or confusion. It's about meeting these challenges with strength, curiosity, and compassion. A Capgras delusion teaches us that the mind's power to deceive is matched only by its capacity to heal and grow. The same neural pathways that can betray us can be rewired for clarity and trust. As we prepare to close this exploration, the finale will focus on harnessing this power for personal growth and transformation, turning psychological challenge into profound empowerment. Personal growth is often romanticized as a linear path, step by step, goal by goal, toward success and fulfillment. But the truth is far more complex and, frankly, more challenging. Growth happens in the shadows of uncertainty, amidst the chaos of doubt, and sometimes through the cracks where our minds break and rebuild. Capgras delusion, with its unsettling confusion between reality and illusion, symbolizes this very struggle. It teaches us that growth is not just about acquiring new skills or knowledge. It's about learning to live with the unknown, to face the invisible fears that threaten to distort our sense of self and the world around us. To strengthen your mind, you must first embrace uncertainty as a constant companion. When the mind seeks certainty at all costs, it becomes rigid and vulnerable to deception, internal impostors disguised as self-doubt, fear, or denial. But when you open yourself to the possibility that you don't have all the answers, that your perceptions might be incomplete or even wrong, you begin to build mental flexibility, the foundation of resilience. This flexibility allows you to question your assumptions, adapt to change, and approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. It is the mindset of explorers, innovators, and leaders who thrive despite chaos. Another key to growth is cultivating self-compassion. When the mind betrays you, whether through delusions, mistakes, or negative self-talk, respond not with harsh judgment but with kindness. Recognize that vulnerability is part of the human experience, not a sign of weakness. Moreover, building a strong inner narrative, a story of your values, purpose, and strengths, helps anchor your identity even when external realities feel unstable. This narrative acts as a lighthouse in storms of confusion. Finally, embrace continuous learning, not just academically but emotionally and psychologically. Read widely, seek diverse perspectives, and challenge your cognitive biases regularly. Growth requires dismantling the mental walls that limit perception. Remember, the journey toward a strong, clear mind is ongoing. The brain's plasticity means you can rewire destructive patterns and reinforce healthy connections throughout life. Capgras delusion is a stark reminder of what can happen when emotional and cognitive pathways break down. But it also inspires hope, because it shows how vital these pathways are, and how much power we have to rebuild them through awareness, courage, and compassion. As we reach the end of this deep exploration into Capgras delusion, let's reflect on the powerful lessons it offers. Not just about a rare psychological disorder, but about the human mind's incredible fragility and resilience. Capgras Delusion exposes a dark truthing, that our perceptions, no matter how vivid or convincing, can be deceived. It shows us how trust, one of life's most precious currencies, can be shattered within the mind itself. Yet, within this shadow lies an opportunity, a chance to understand the forces that shape our reality and to harness them for growth. The disorder reminds us that mental clarity and emotional connection are not guarantees, they require constant nurturing and vigilance. It challenges us to confront the impostors within, fears, doubts, and distorted beliefs that block our path to success and fulfillment. But here's the empowering truth: the very brain that can betray us also holds the key to our healing and transformation. Neuroplasticity allows us to rebuild connections, retrain our emotional responses, and strengthen our inner trust. Success in any arena begins with mastering this inner landscape. It demands emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and the courage to face uncertainty without losing hope. When you apply these principles, you become a guardian of your own mind, able to detect mental distortions before they take root, to nurture trust in yourself and others, and to rise stronger from adversity. In a world full of unknowns, where relationships can falter and reality can feel unstable, your greatest asset is your resilient, adaptable mind. Capgras Delusion may be a rare anomaly, but its lessons are universal. Let it inspire you to embrace your vulnerabilities as gateways to strength, to seek truth even when it's uncomfortable, and to build a life where trust and clarity are not illusions, but foundations. Thank you for joining this journey into one of psychology's most fascinating mysteries. May it empower you to face your own challenges with wisdom and courage, and to create a reality grounded in truth and resilience.